just letting everyone know that you will be recorded. And although we aren't planning on releasing the slides, we will be posting the recording on our website so that other people can watch it at a later time. Great. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. We see everyone's kind of filing in. It's 10:30, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a really exciting webinar today because it's the first time these results have actually been released publicly. So we're really excited to be here. We're really excited to share these results. We're going to hold space at the end of the webinar, a solid 30 minutes for question and answers. And so that's the best opportunity. Feel free to use the chat and to enter your questions as they come up, but we're going to take on a lot of these questions at the end of the webinar. So we'll do the first hour presenting the information and then the last half hour to address questions and answers. So we're really excited. We're hoping for a really engaging group dialogue, because at the end of the day, the questions you ask, we learn from. And just so you know that we are presenting phase 1, but we have been green lighted for phase 2. So the questions and feedback we get today will be really helpful as we design and move forward with phase 2. So thanks again for joining us. Our panel today is going to be Mark and I. So Mark is joining us from LA Sanitation. Him and I have been working very closely over the last year on this particular project. And he's going to be presenting a lot of the information from LA San's perspective and the information coming out of their program. I'm also going to be presenting on behalf of the California Product Stewardship Council. And as your host today of this webinar, we'll tell you a little insight of what we do with textiles and on our work on textile recovery outside of this project as well. So Cpsc, for those who don't know us, we're a tiny but mighty team of 5. We have 5 staff, and we're primarily funded by cities and counties in California who are looking to expand their waste recovery programs in a manner that doesn't impact their garbage rates, meaning using industry funding, using green design, using other modes of co-funding and prevention as a way to save money while establishing circular material recovery systems. So you can see our board is represented by cities, counties, recyclers, haulers, and we wouldn't be where we are today without the support of our associates, who are the local government partners, and our sponsors. Again, we would love to see more textiles and clothing companies on here, but also really proud of the ones who have stepped up and really joined Cpsc in our mission. Our mission at Cpsc, like I said, is not only to expand garbage collection systems and waste material management systems from one that's primarily government funded to one that's co-funded and really engages the industry to reduce the public costs. Many of you might know there was some really big composting mandates that happened a few years ago here in California. And across the board, those unfunded mandates are resulting in expansion of the programs and ultimately increasing some of the garbage rates. So when we think about how we can collect textiles and how we can create a sustainable program for textile recovery, we want to move forward in a manner that doesn't impact the local residents negatively through their garbage rates. So Cpsc is leading 4 active projects, but we have 5 on here to give credit to some of our original projects that really led our work in textile recovery. So today we'll primarily be talking about the City of Los Angeles, but to give a little context, the California Product Stewardship Council does have 4 active projects. One of them is with the San Francisco Department of the Environment, and this particular pilot project is working with Goodwill to establish a repair academy and some of the opportunities to implement sorting for repair and upcycling at the Goodwill level and at the charity collection level. The City of Los Angeles was, I don't want to spoil Mark's slides, but it was a grant funded by a foundation. And the City of Los Angeles, the goal was kind of to create these material collection hubs. The original grant got cut the budget. And so we did what the best we could to really make it an impactful pilot given the limited budget. The other opportunity that really stood out to actually push the marker for textile recovery was the County of Los Angeles really worked with the City of Los Angeles to match some funds because the original scope got cut, the budget. So the additional funds coming from the county, we were able to expand our scope and really look at other types of generators of textile waste. So while the City of Los Angeles really focused on garment manufacturing and clothing brands, the County of Los Angeles expanded that scope to include hospitals, detention centers, laundries, and hotels. So again, looking at the different types of commercial generators of textiles, so we can understand what's the type of textiles in their waste stream, what are some opportunities to divert those materials? And ultimately, what do we do with the non-usable materials? And then finally, we also have a grant project with the County of Alameda. This one is also deeply rooted in repair. Alameda County has a database called the Resource Database that shares information of different vendors and different information on how to repair and reduce your waste for the materials you currently own. So we're working with Stop Waste to add different textile handlers because as we found out over the last few years, especially during COVID, that we really can't rely on the thrifts to do all the heavy lifting. Even though they're a major source of collection infrastructure, they also don't have outlets for recycling and opportunities to divert landfill-bound textiles. So with the resource database, we're looking to add really unique textile handlers, maybe a leather specialist and vintage dry cleaning that really focuses on delicate materials. We've also found quilt specialists. So ultimately, the idea is to get the artists and kind of the disenfranchised repair infrastructure into a centralized database so that the residents, when looking, actually seeking this information of how to avoid the landfill, they'll be given a list of local businesses and local opportunities to actually avoid the landfill itself. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Mark, and he's going to give some background information on LA-SAN.
Thanks, Joanne. So my name is Mark, and I'm an environmental engineering associate with LA Sanitation and Environment. And like Cpsc just mentioned, there are a lot of projects going on in the textile space right now, as you guys just saw on the previous slide. But today, primarily, we'll be focusing on the project or partnership we have with Cpsc and the City of Los Angeles project. So before we dive into that a little bit, I just wanted to give some background on City and LA Sanitation. So first and foremost, we are here, LA Sanitation is here to protect public health and the environment. And how we're doing that is basically collecting, cleaning, recycling solids and wastewater generated by everybody, including residential, commercial, and industrial users in not only the City of Los Angeles, but our contract cities as well and the surrounding communities. So we have about 4 million residents, and then through 3 broad programs, the solid resources, clean water, and watershed protection is how we are servicing our 4 million residents. So you can go to the next slide, please, Joanne. Yeah, so just a little bit more background on our 3 programs. We have a clean water program, a watershed protection program, and solid resources. Clean water will be our industrial and residential wastewater that gets treated at our plants. Watershed protection is all like the storm drain runoff when it rains, right? All that water gets collected into our local watersheds here in the city of Los Angeles. And solid resources is exactly what you think it is. It's solid waste collection and recycling. So this is the area that we'll be mainly focusing on in this presentation. So back to this project now. This project is a circular economy initiative that was is being pursued and spearheaded by a team within LA Sanitation called LA Industry. And this is a team that I'm a part of, and we are a pollution prevention and outreach sustainability group here in the city. And mainly we work with businesses and industrial users to try to make them more sustainable, increase the business retention rates in the city of Los Angeles, and to help them save on costs. So we're here to try and establish collaboration between public and private, mainly between businesses, right? Engage them with all the resources we have in the city of Los Angeles, and just act as liaisons here, cultivating a business-friendly environment. With that said, LA Industry applied for the My LA 2050 Gold Hirsch Foundation's Grants Challenge back in 2020, and we ended up receiving $25,000 of the original $100,000 that was available. The results were purely based on popularity in the end. Once you became a finalist, it was just whoever got more votes basically on social media, and we ended up getting third place, which was $25,000. Like Joanne mentioned, we had more ambitious goals initially with the project to establish literal hubs, so to speak, fiscal hubs, to try and establish a reuse market, really, in a local reuse market for textiles in the city. But due to our limited budget, we're thankful that the county matched some of that budget to expand the initiative of textiles in the county as well, to try to get more publicity and just more backing in general behind textiles. So currently, our objective is still to establish a local reuse market, and we're going to try to do that by creating recovery roadmaps and piloting textile recovery models. And then, yeah, okay, so within sanitation, there's a program I'm sure most of you are familiar with called Recycla, which is a public-private partnership that establishes a waste and recycling franchise system for all businesses and large multifamily residences in the city of Los Angeles. So these are our franchise haulers that are only in charge of commercial / large multifamily housing. And all the residential waste is hauled by LA Sand's own refuse collectors and drivers. So today we're mainly, this pilot is focused on the commercial textile waste that's being generated, and that's why it's important to loop in Recycla, or to give some background on Recycla. So Recycla, basically the only people that can touch the textile waste that's going into Recycla bins, whether that be black and blue bins currently, are authorized Recycla haulers, or the RSPs themselves. Currently, there are actually no authorized haulers that specialize in textile collection, sorting, recycling, or anyone that can handle the volume or sort of end market specifications that are needed really for the creation of a local reuse market, or even some type of infrastructure to establish some sort of consistent reuse streams. There is a facility certification program, and that would be the path to go down if you want to become an authorized facility. It's actually one of the cornerstones of Recycla, and it ensures that facilities accepting solid resources collected through the Recycla program are aligned and meet the goals of the city. So these haulers that we partner with, they conduct regular waste audits and report volumes and characterizations to LA Sand, of course. And I just want to mention that everything that we'll be talking about today is the results from phase 1. We have been greenlit for a phase 2, and we're trying to get that started as soon as possible. Phase 2 will be, and Joanne will get more into the details of what phase 1 was about. But phase 2, we're looking to pilot temporary pop-up sorting events and more permanent sorting facilities / locations. Basically the recovery models that we're trying to implement. And if anybody is interested in learning more or participating potentially as a case study, obviously feel free to reach out to us, contact us. We'd love to hear from you. And also just want to give credit to the Recycla service providers as well, or RSPs. They are, they are in charge first and foremost of helping with the textile diversion, and it's only through their waste characterization studies that we are getting data insight on the current landscape of textiles in Los Angeles. So on the screen right here in front of us, we have a table of the reported textile waste from specifically 2019 to 2021. So again, this is the Recycla reported commercial textile waste, which includes industries, businesses, and large multifamily housing complexes. This does not include the single-family homes or any type of residential self-reported waste streams. So with that in mind, just a little quick overview. Black bin is for waste, solid waste, and the blue bin is for recycling. As you guys can see, between the years of 2019 to 2021, we have a total weight and tonnage of around 225,000 tons of textile waste, categorized as textile waste in the black bin, and we have about 10,000 tons in the blue bin. Now, keep in mind that currently there's no infrastructure to sort textile waste or to separate it in the blue bin. So all that is actually counted as contaminants in the blue bin. Please do not throw your textile waste in the blue bin. There's currently no way to sort that out, and it is counted as a contaminant. So moving on to the next row, which is the average weight or tons annually, you can see that per year during this time from 2019 to 2021, we have about 75,000 tons in the black bin per year, and have about 3,000 tons in the blue bin per year. And then one more row down, percentage-wise, that's about 8.5% average composition in the black bin, and about 1.8% composition in the blue bin. And as you guys can see, the black bin rate is much higher than the blue bin, but the fact that there is a blue bin percentage at all is a problem. And yeah, there shouldn't be any there. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about, just to give you guys, paint a visualization of what that even means, right? Because to me, 75,000 tons sounds like a lot, but I don't know what that means versus like 50,000 tons, really, in my head, to try to visualize. So we did a calculation here on the screen for you guys to see. Keep in mind that this calculation was done with some assumptions with the limited data we have, and our source is cited at the bottom below the graphic that you can see. So just to walk you guys through it, walk everybody through it, our source is a peer-reviewed recent article as well. So we're assuming, one's women's jacket size medium, one specifically denim women's jacket in size medium is about 1.5 square meters or 1.1 pounds of fabric, or 0.002 tons of CO2 of greenhouse gases that are being emitted to create that one denim jacket. Now, moving on, you have the conversion. About 1 ton of fabric is 1,500 jackets, or 2.65 tons of CO2. Now, if you guys remember from the last slide, I mentioned that per year annually in tonnage, we have about 75,000 tons of textile waste in the black bin per year between 2019 and 2021. So that is equivalent to about 42,856 passenger vehicles driven in 1 year, or about almost 200,000 tons of CO2 being emitted as GHGs. So that's the equivalent per year of annual tonnage we have in textiles in the city of Los Angeles for the commercial side as being released as GHG gases. Again, this is a rough estimate. There are a lot of some assumptions made with the limited data we have, but this is more so just to paint a picture for you guys to try to visualize the amount of the GHG footprint that is currently textiles. And then next slide, please. So this is the Calorie cycle statewide waste data. And again, this is included to give everyone a comparison on the statewide data versus the local municipality data, which is the city of Los Angeles. Keep in mind that Calorie cycle does a waste characterization every 4 years. So the most recent one would be 2018, as 2022 has not been over yet. So looking at the 2018 data, specifically, we are interested in the textile waste stream, obviously from Calorie cycle. You can see that for textiles, they break it down into 3 categories. So they have their organic textiles, they have their synthetic textiles that they break it down to, and then finally they have accessories, which is shoes, purses, belts, etc. And keep in mind too that in the synthetic textiles, there's also mixed and unknown that are included in that second category. As you guys can see, for the purposes of our comparison, since we are comparing the Recycla data, which would be the equivalent in Calorie cycle, if you look at the first table, it would be the equivalent of rows 1 and 3. So franchise commercial disposed waste and multifamily residential disposed waste. The averages of 2.9% and 3.2% is just a little bit over 3%. So as you guys can see that let's just say it's 3.1% in their commercial / multifamily housing data for state level. 3.1% would be the percentage of textile composition in the total waste stream that from their waste characterization. Now let's compare it to the cities, which is about 8.57% in the black bin. So you can see that right now in the city, there's quite a bit more textile composition going into the black bin than at the state level, and it just shows the need and opportunity here in the city to try to reroute, implement some circular economy principles, and the importance of this pilot that we're doing to try and get that number down. And with that, I'll hand it back to Joanne to talk more about the details.
Yeah, having this background information from Calorie cycle and from Recycla, it really helped give us a picture going into this project and the pilot. So the other thing, once we realized our budget, we knew we didn't have enough money to service all the businesses in creating textile waste in the city of Los Angeles. So what we decided to do, our approach was to do a lot of interviews, phone calls, and surveys to get as much of the background data as possible. But when it came to actually picking a case study and moving materials, we really tried to pick companies who were breaking the mold. So we went above and beyond to find companies who had a unique business model that incorporated recovery or design for recyclability. We looked at different processors, recyclers, upcyclers, composters, and really specifically ones who were active in the Los Angeles area, one who had the opportunity to have being an ongoing leader in this space, and also opportunities for engaging recyclers who are already in established programs. So I do want to give a call out to Aquafil and Circular Polymers. They're both recyclers that are functioning within the carpet recycling program. They currently are not getting enough materials for their technology and are really excited to see more textiles being sorted and recycled for their specifications. But ultimately, we wanted to pick brands, like I said, who were designing for recyclability or designing for compostability, that green design factor. So it made our life easier to determine what the fiber type was and determine the best process if we already know what the material is. We really looked at educational leaders and academic leaders like CSUN and the Art Center, because at the end of the day, they're churning out the next generation of designers and brand employees. So equipping them with knowledge on circularity and just the challenges of recovering these materials really led to the success of this program. And I do want to give a shout out. I see Lydia from California Cloth Foundry has joined us. And I'll do a quick scroll to see if any of our other case studies have joined us. But I do see quite a few who have participated in our surveys and interviews and really contributed to the information. So we would definitely want to thank all of you for participating. And what we have here is the material flow diagram. So I know there's a lot of information on here, but let's take our eyes straight to the middle, which is the generator. So the generator is the business who's creating the waste and creating the fabric waste. We're just going to keep it general. We're not going to use names at this point, just to keep it fair and equitable. But once we determined what type of material scraps are coming out of the generator's stream, we asked questions like, what's the volume? Is it consistent throughout the year? Is it mixed with other types of materials? Once we really understood the characterization of the textile waste stream, we were able to divert it into our processors. So let's start with the blue ones. The blue processors are who we qualified as reuse, repair, and upcycling. And according to the waste hierarchy, this is preferred over recycling every day, all day, forever. So we wanted to take an advantage of, again, the academic institutions who are really leading in the education and being a champion in the community. And with those, we gave dead stock to the student sew shops. We did a compost trial at the student fashion farm at CSU Northridge. And we really looked at what other campus initiatives, like there's a reusable menstrual pad initiative happening, and we wanted to make sure we got them organic, natural materials to use for those campus initiatives. We also worked with some of the jobbers. I think this is one of the job types or categories of stakeholders that often go overlooked in textile recovery. Jobbers are people who work with the brands and work with the factories to take the dead bolts and the materials that have value and actually find ways to sell them. Jobbers have existed for a very, very long time. And a lot of them are not on Google. They're not necessarily always a business that's publicly available. They thrive on their relationships with the brands and relationships with the different generators. If we could just encourage everyone to mute themselves. Oh, I see it. I'm going to mute it real quick. So jobbers, again, we wanted to really champion and celebrate people who are already doing this work, whether they're within the system or not. They're really doing a lot of the work to divert the valuable fabric scraps. Next, we worked with a couple compost. And I know, like I mentioned earlier, composting is a type of recovery process that's having a lot of investments right now. Most cities and counties, in order to be compliant with a law that passed a few years ago, are creating municipal or county level composting programs. So again, if we want to save money on a future program, let's tap into infrastructure and processors that already exist. But the biggest problem with this is the design of the fabric and design of the garment. So we had to make sure there were zero synthetics, no plastic, no synthetic fibers. We had to find a brand who is tracing all of their material sources. And we had to find a brand who was making sure that any treatments after the fibers were made into fabrics were food grade or compostable safe. Meaning we found, again, another big shout out to California Cloth Foundry. They source a lot of their fabrics and fibers from within California. They use plant-based dyes and mineral mordants, which are, used in the process. And they track the whole process to ensure that no chemical finishes are being added to the fabric surfaces. So having controlled for all those design features and found a brand who actually designed for soil-to-soil circularity, we were able to divert scraps from the California Cloth Foundry into 2 compost pilots. So one of them's at the CSU Northridge. It's a smaller pile, but it's run at the Student Fashion Farm by students and grad students. The other one is with Compostable LA. That is a large windrow system that is getting tested and turned regularly, and we should have the final results of that compost study at the end of May. So just giving another shout out, probably in June, we will have a second webinar just on the compost results, because it was something that we were just so excited to trial, but also we feel like it's a really good motivation for other brands to take California Cloth Foundry's lead and to design their products from the very beginning to make them easier to handle and recover at the end of their life. Next, we did upcycling and wiping cloths. So these are, nothing new. There's a lot of artists and a lot of designers that are, especially in Los Angeles, working with these types of materials. One of the challenges we had, though, is we need whoever is actually cutting and sewing these garments to have the California Garment Manufacturer's License. It's a California-specific law. It was created, I believe, in like the 80s or 90s as a result of, preventing sweatshops. So it's a really good law, but in its applicability to upcycling and repair, we're still working with the California Labor Bureau to make sure that, the law is up to date with what recycling, upcycling, and repair businesses are really going to be working with to make sure it's equitable for all businesses trying to join this space. So we did large scraps to the upcycling, but then we're able to divert some of the smaller scraps into recycling. So we'll go on next to the 2 fabric to fabric recycling, and I will give a caveat that we did not pay for any mechanical recycling. There is no mechanical recycling in California. There's plenty on the East Coast, Mexico, Spain, India, Pakistan, Portugal. We have none in California. And given our limited budget, we know that the concept of mechanical recycling is preferred over chemical recycling. We also know it's been around for a lot longer. So we did not actually have the budget to cover mechanical recycling, but we did have a couple case studies who've used their own money to send materials to mechanical recycling. We were able to use their invoices and to use their results in our pilot as kind of a lesson learned as to how much it really would cost and what it takes to get those materials to the mechanical recyclers. So then we did use a couple chemical recyclers, and I know it's a little controversial because at the end of the day, chemical recycling takes a lot of energy, a lot of water, and unless we know what their effluents are, making sure there's no PFAS in the pellets and no PFAS or other chemicals in the water, we have to be careful. And so as a pilot with a limited budget, we decided to pick chemical recyclers who were already participating in established programs. The proof of concept we were really excited for is really showing that textile recycling has shared infrastructure with the mattress and the carpet stewardship programs. These recyclers, again, if they're getting the right materials that meet their specifications, they're eager to get more materials and looking forward to an opportunity to participate. So some of our results, like I said, we went into detail with a lot of our generators to understand, well, what type of products are the textile waste coming from? So the gray ones on this pie chart are ones that are coming out of factories. So these are scraps, dead stock, canceled incomplete garments. Maybe it's a mess up on a sample, or maybe a brand no longer wanted to release those and had motivation to cancel those. So sometimes they get slashed, sometimes they get recycled, but either way, 8% of the waste stream, textile waste, was canceled and incomplete garments. Dead stock and fabric headers are when you have a bolt of fabric and there's not enough left on that bolt to do another run. So usually, you know, it's enough for hobbyists or small designers, but from a large cutting room, dead stock is actually really common. But we also want to have some of the information from LA County on this particular pie chart. So we do want to call out the hospitality and kind of linen textiles that we see here. So sheets, pillowcases, and towels. We see those across all types of generators. But one thing that I really want to point out is this orange slice. So 17% is what we're putting in the category of uniforms. This is coming out of commercial generators, but when we started asking local government, how much are you spending on uniforms? How much are you spending on jumpsuits? How much are you spending on aprons? Those are the 3 top textile products that local government buy: uniforms, jumpsuits, and aprons. And when we started digging into it, none of them have recycled content. None of them have take-back programs. But these are considered very recyclable because they tend to be mono-material. So you're not going to have, you know, a bunch of spandex mixed into your towels. You're not going to have a bunch of chemical finishes on your sheets and pillowcases, hopefully. So they're considered more recyclable than some of the mixed unidentified materials in some of the residential and other streams. So then we went down to the polymer and fiber type level. Every study that we've seen before from the Recycla data and also the CalRecycle data, they just do categorical textiles. But when we understand what the recyclers need and what the different recovery partners need, is they need to know fiber type. They need to know, is it natural? Can I re-dye it? Is it synthetic with blends, et cetera? So as you can see, the orange bars are fiber types that include synthetics. So these are about 69% of the total textiles contain some sort of synthetics. So that means they're not compostable. They won't take dye as much as a natural fiber. And if they're blended, their recyclability opportunities are greatly diminished. But there's still hope. There's some cotton, there's some flax, and brands like California Cloth Foundry who are really looking to develop those natural fiber systems. But I will say just a quick comparison from LA to CalRecycle data. In this data, we found that 69% of the textiles had some sort of synthetics. And according to the CalRecycle waste characterization, it was about 58%. So not only is it a higher volume within Los Angeles, it's also more synthetic than at the statewide level. So one of the other things that we did in process to create this hub, since we couldn't afford a physical hub, we really tried to do a virtual hub. So many of you know at Cpsc, we're really famous for our maps. We created a statewide map for you to find your medicine disposal locations. We also created a statewide map for 1 pound propane cylinders for safe disposal. So it only seemed natural to take our other experience in making public searchable maps to create a map for textile handlers. This was very underfunded, so I will admit, it's primarily mapped out in the Bay Area and Los Angeles where we have grant funds. There are a lot more handlers and processors than we had the opportunity, but this is our first step. In phase 2, we definitely want to expand it to make sure everyone in the Los Angeles area is in this map. But we also want to look for grants, whether it's statewide grants or outside funding, to really expand this, you know, globally. So I do have it pulled up. So let me see. Are you able to see the map on the Google map? Great.
Yeah.
So you can see, let me zoom out so you can see, here's recyclers in Portugal and Europe. They've got some great things going on in India. But if you zoom in, you can really see the Los Angeles area. And right now, let's see, we have, let me put our generators on. You can see, so our goal is to make it functional so that you can search by, okay, I have cotton. I have a bunch of old clothes that are ruined. And so you would be able to search in this bar what type of material you're looking to recycle or repurpose. And ideally, everything would come down. I do want to put the repair companies on there too, because I see some of our upcyclers like Circular Fashion LA. I want to make sure your dot is on there. But again, so we have collectors on here, we have upcyclers and repair companies, and then we also have some of the recyclers as well. One of the problems is that these recyclers are not receiving materials from the public. They want them in the bales or larger. They want 40-foot containers at a time. So ultimately, we need to see more collectors, and we also need to see more consolidators, but they have to be within that Recycla program. So again, the big challenge is not that these businesses don't exist, but that they're not existing within the program so that the haulers are authorized to actually drop off at these locations. So we're excited that it's just the beginning of this map, and we're hoping to go public with it in 2022. But if anyone ever has a material they're looking for help to process, just email me and I can look it up on the map for you. So I really want to talk about some of our lessons learned, because there was a lot of things coming out of this pilot project that is not only influencing our phase 2 of the pilot, but also in some ongoing permanent programs that we're discussing in model language. The one is that leadership and investment already exists. There's already brands who are creating, in this space, companies like Sway's Sew Shop and other types of recovery upcycling businesses are growing so quickly that we really have to find ways to champion the leaders and the businesses that already exist. And that does include the thrift stores. No matter what we do moving forward, we have to include the thrift stores and the collectors and charities in our program so that we can help support their access to usable goods, while always also incentivizing them to recycle the non-usable stuff. The shared infrastructure, as long as these materials are meeting the specifications, there's opportunity to save money. By adding more materials to the carpet recyclers and mattress recyclers, they could potentially save money for those established programs. And those established programs, just as a reminder, are consumer paid. So when you buy carpet, you pay 35 cents a yard. When you buy mattresses in California, you pay $10.50 a mattress. That money goes to a program, and that program funds are used to, help recyclers, to cover transportation costs, to give grants. It's really used to kind of establish the infrastructure to make it thrive. And there's a lot of opportunities for us to not only share the infrastructure, but create a future program for textiles that does the same. The green design for fabrics. So again, we would love for more companies to follow California Cloth Foundry's lead. But those who are using synthetics and those who are using blends, there's opportunities to co-invest and co-fund some different recycling opportunities. We know the majority of the fabrics are blends, and we know the majority do have synthetics. So until we have proper recycling opportunities for those blended, unidentified fabrics, repair, upcycling is truly our best bet. So we need more brands to be transparent on what's in their fabrics. We need these fabrics and garments to be designed to be easier to disassemble and easier to identify, and also easier to recycle. At the end of the day, there is no recycler who's really willing to open the floodgates for residential without the support for finding the end markets. And the other opportunity that we really learned was the role of green purchasing. Like I mentioned, every local government buys some form of textiles. whether it's rags, cleaning products. So establishing green purchasing for textile products can look a variety of ways, but there's a couple ideas that CPSC has really been pushing. And one of those is to buy with recycled content, to have an RFP or a contract vendor who has a take-back program, or more importantly, you should offer repair services to your employees wearing their uniforms. If we can start offering repair to the garments we already own and the garments we already purchase, there's an immediate source reduction and a really good opportunity to lead by example. So I do want to show you these pictures that we have. On the top right is a picture of the garment that is all natural from the California Cloth Foundry. And below is the compost pile that we created with some of the scraps. The compost pile was about 30% scraps, 30% food waste with some bark and some chicken manure mixed in. I have the exact recipe if anyone's looking to replicate it. But we're really excited to get those results in May. So where we are in the next steps and what we are talking about in terms of the challenges to actually create a program. So one of them is convenient collection. We talk about this in EPR and product stewardship programs all the time, but it's a major challenge right now because at the end of the day, these cutting rooms and these factories don't have the time or space to separate it. They ultimately want to throw it in a bin, have someone else pick it up, and it needs to be convenient in order to participate. The moment you start adding more barriers and you adding inconveniences, you're going to get less participation, more contamination. So again, making it easy to participate and understanding that the materials coming out of these commercial generators are mixed, they're changing every day, and they don't always have the details as to what this fabric is because their client provides it. It's not always disclosed to the level of detail that the recyclers need. We definitely need some large facilities for sorting capacity. And they can't go into a MRF. So a MRF is a material recovery facility. These are what we use for mixed solid waste or your mixed recyclables. But the textiles can't go into the established MRF facilities because they're soft, they absorb, they are combustible. We've been tracking all the MRF fires caused by either batteries or textiles, two really flammable items, and they tangle. So these machines are designed for hard plastics. So when you get a textile in there, they tend to tangle the conveyor belts, they get caught in the cog wheels. We have, again, been tracking all the textiles and the damages they're causing at the MRFs by incorrectly placing them in the blue bins. In order to be a large sorting facility, again, they would have to be part of the Recycla program. But in phase 2, we're willing to test some exempt from the program with a couple ways of giving them basically commodity materials instead of waste materials. There is a couple being considered right now, and I just want to encourage anyone else who's on this webinar, if you are in the process or considering to invest or build a large-scale sorting facility, please do so. Please do so quickly. The city of LA will need a minimum of 3 large capacity sorting facilities just to manage the commercial waste. So 3 in LA, a couple in San Francisco, and we maybe will scratch the surface. The other thing that's a major challenge is consolidation and transportation. These are the biggest barriers. Again, storage, transportation. We all, for those of us who live in California, we know these are really expensive problems. These are expensive problems in housing. These are expensive problems in other industries. So we can't think that textile recycling isn't going to face these same challenges. The other really exciting thing is EPR programs tend to cover these challenges and fund or at least subsidize the economic barriers to circularity. And the other thing that we really found challenging, like I mentioned before, is these in-state processors that are using mechanical processes and not only shredding and taking it down to the fluff, we need those extra steps or the tail end of the circular economy to take those fluff or to take those pellets and make new fibers and make new fabrics. those extra steps, right? We take the recycling, we can collect all day and we can shred it all day. But until we get these materials to the processors to make new products, it's not a circular economy. It's just accumulating waste. So what we found were a lot of the mechanical recyclers were either out of state or out of country. It would be affordable if there was an EPR type program to support the transportation. But until then, we need more in-state opportunities to drive that circular economy. We have a really strong manufacturing, right? So once it's a fabric, we have great infrastructure for cutting, sewing, and making the garments. But there's those 2 or 3 missing steps. After we collect it, we need to recycle it and then make the new fibers and fabrics. Those extra steps are growing on the East Coast and the Carolinas, but we would love to see more in California. We're recommending that Recycla takes a mixed model collection approach. We think having the haulers go from generator to generator and doing that kind of curbside collection, it could work. But at the end of the day, there's other types of collection models that are really common in the waste industry. Things like temporary events. We see these in the household hazardous waste. We would like to see them in textiles, because one of the benefits of doing temporary events is sometimes there are very unique fabric types. Like, for example, when they're going into bathing suit season, there are different materials coming out of the factories while they're producing bathing suits, which are primarily nylon and very recyclable, as opposed to, say, the winter season when they're making coats and raincoats. So having different models of collection, of course, we want permanent Recycla facilities. Again, we need a minimum, it says 2, but I'm going to say 3 because there are so many textiles. But we also need to utilize the temporary and also using these collection hubs or facilities to give low-cost access to the people using these materials. So again, the problem is not collecting it. The challenge is getting the collected materials to the next stage of users. And we know in Los Angeles, there's plenty of upcyclers. There's plenty of people who want to design with these materials for their sustainable collections, their eco collections, and even just aligning with their business model. So by giving local designers and local brands free to low cost access to the recovered materials, we're going to incentivize more reuse and upcycling and really helping these businesses thrive who are already doing this, but they're paying for the materials. So again, incentivization over mandates is definitely an approach Cpsc likes. So some of the things that we really think will be successful in a Los Angeles textile recovery program, obviously it needs to be convenient. We want these businesses to thrive, to want to recycle, and to make it convenient to participate. The other thing is education. We think education could really start tomorrow because we know there are some processors and some opportunities already available, right? If anyone has 85% nylon or higher, let me know, we can get it to Aquafil. If anyone has, materials that are dead stock or fabric headers, let me know, we can get it to the upcyclers. So again, kind of building out that website and that education could be a really short-term goal. But at the end of the day, we need ongoing funding. We need to create a program that has ongoing collection and keeps the recyclers and upcyclers fulfilled with their material needs. So Cpsc, we created a statewide textile recovery advisory committee. This came out of a suggestion when we worked with Cal Recycle and a couple brands, and we realized in order for it to be, hosted by the UC system or hosted by Cal Recycle, you have to pass a law, there has to be funding. So Cpsc, given that we are funded and this is aligned with our mission, we've been hosting the Statewide Textile Recovery Advisory Committee. We put out a report in December outlining all of our policy recommendations at the local, state, and federal levels. That report is on our website, and I'm happy to share more details on the next few slides. But this group meets regularly. We not only weigh in on active legislation, and there are 3 active textile-related legislation this year at the California legislature. So we lobby as a group, we put in our coalition letters, we make statements as a group. We have a big statement coming out soon on the McKinsey report on circularity in California. And it gives us an opportunity to have cross-stakeholder collaboration. So you can see we have brands, we have local government, we have NGOs and other consultants. We are looking to add some haulers and some recyclers and some upcyclers. So if anyone's interested in joining, we are taking on new members in 2022. But ultimately, we need policy change to make a dramatic difference and actually move the needle. So at the local level, there's some really good opportunities for those who are joining us from local government. The reason I put number 1 and number 2 first is because a lot of those opportunities are at the department level. So to update your green purchasing or to update your request for proposals for uniforms, you don't always have to go to city council. You can make those changes at the department level, which is a lot easier. And again, we can move the needle today and tomorrow. But ultimately looking at partnerships. A lot of cities and counties are looking for these partnerships with charities and other collectors, but they're really worried that they don't want to contribute to what we're seeing in the secondhand clothing markets, which is mixed bales of usable and unusable textiles mixed together, sent abroad, and the developing countries receiving them do not have the infrastructure for recycling. So they're accumulating in their landfills, they're accumulating in the environment. And I always like to remind everyone, our landfills in California are very high tech and pristine compared to the others around the world. So we should always be landfilling in our landfills that we know are safe and protected over dumping in landfills in other countries. So as a way to circumvent contributing to that problem, we're recommending that local government, if you're going to pursue a partnership with a collector, to mandate reporting, to mandate recycling of the unusables, and to really track where these materials are going. Without that transparency, you're really just perpetuating the problem. But we also want to make sure that these partnerships, which are convenient and successful, have a co-beneficial future. So we're not discouraging those partnerships, but we're just asking to increase your requirements in order to get that contract. Obviously a public database or a map, but also looking at EPR and disposal bans at the local level. What we found in California and our history of extended producer responsibility is that the locals lead. It was Alameda County who went all the way to the Supreme Court over an EPR program for medicine. And what the Supreme Court found was that it's the local government's obligation to protect the local environment and the local residents. So qualifying EPR at the local level, but we do see a lot more EPR happening at the state level. So at the state level, I think anything we can do to incentivize the repair and fund these repair, alteration, and charities would be the immediate relief that we could get. Any type of tax incentives or grants specifically for recovery that incorporates repair would be the biggest investment in the waste hierarchy over recycling. But ultimately, we do want to see EPR at the state level. We want to see one program that is different than France and different than what's proposed in the UK. California Product Stewardship Council foresees a future EPR program for textiles and clothing to be one that supports thrifts and repair infrastructure to make sure that the brands running the EPR program are truly only dealing with the unusable recycling bound materials to make sure the established infrastructure for repair and recovery are protected. We also see a lot of action for the PFAS, which are the perfluoroalkyls, the waterproofing sprays, and microplastics, and then also some education at the state level. I will say at this point, there are 3 active bills in the legislature. One of them is the most important one that we're really advocating for is SB 1187. This is a bill by Sidney Kamlager, and it's to establish a CalRecycle co-funded pilot program in the counties of Los Angeles and Ventura. What we like about this particular bill is the language that says co-funding. There's language that says the garment brands and the garment industry has an opportunity to pay into these pilot projects so that we can actually have a private-public partnership that everyone keeps claiming is the best. But we won't have that partnership if the brands aren't paying in. Otherwise, CalRecycle will just get stuck paying for it all. And that's not a long-term goal, and that's not a long-term program that we could really support. We want one that really encourages the industry to co-fund and create systems that are equitable for California's residents, who ultimately pay, whether they're paying through their purchase price or they pay for their garbage rates. It's a lot cheaper to pay for it at the purchase point instead of your garbage rate. And then the federal policies, I won't spend too much time on these, but ultimately we're kind of fighting an uphill battle. As long as virgin fossil fuels are subsidized, recycled fossil fuels and synthetics don't have an economic level playing field. Similarly with the tariffs. If you spray waterproofing spray on a garment, you get a lower tariff because it's a functional good. So we have a lot of incentives at our borders to incentivize different mixed materials, unidentified chemicals, and until we address those tariff barriers, we're not going to see anything major at the federal level. And the other thing I really want to call on is number 5 is the labeling standards. There's also a bill in New York called the Fashion Act, which is also dealing with not just labeling, but transparency over supply chain and where these materials are coming from. And again, transparency and labeling is a product stewardship approach, because having better information and more access to the details of the product makes recovery and recycling a lot easier. So I do want to take a quick moment to just kind of let everyone know what I mean by when I say EPR, or extended producer responsibility. Here in California, we actually have, I always forget the number, I think it's 13 product stewardship and EPR bills. Each bill and each program is slightly different. It comes down to how the law is written, how each sentence makes a really big difference. But there's some key components and what makes it an EPR or a product stewardship program. So on the left side of the spectrum is true EPR. This is 100% industry funded, 100% industry run. So with a true EPR, the money never goes to the state and the materials never go to the state. It's truly a market-based, industry-run program. And there's a lot of benefits that I'm not going to go into too many details on, but ultimately the benefit is that when the industry is in the driver's seat and the industry is paying for the recovery program, they're going to be a lot more cost efficient than if government's running it. And they're going to understand, hey, if we pay for disassembling and recycling, there's more incentive to design for products that are easier to manage at their end of life. The role of government, though, in EPR is ultimately to oversight and enforcement. And without giving government the right tools for effective oversight and enforcement, programs can go awry. We've seen that with some of the carpet program has gone to, been non-compliant and has gone to enforcement. So we want to learn from our past experiences in California as we establish future programs. Because ultimately, EPR is not prescriptive. In the bill language, you don't tell the program how to recycle, where to send the materials. Typically with an EPR program, you set performance requirements, and it's flexible as to how those programs reach those goals. So you set recycling rates, you set convenient collection goals, standards, you set reuse and renovation metrics. And it's through these goals and standards that we can actually get program performance without actually having to run the program. And brands love it because it gives them the flexibility as to how they want to design their program. On the other side of the spectrum is product stewardship. Product stewardship has very little industry funding, and if it is, it's probably something like a labeling update or something that's not a full recovery program. Product stewardship can be voluntary, like brands who are voluntarily taking back their products for recycling. It can also include partnerships and pilots. But at the end of the day, product stewardship is not full EPR. It tends to really focus on just certain elements or certain barriers. Two of the programs that I've mentioned in this program are the mattress program and the carpet program, and we tend to call these hybrid programs because they are publicly funded but industry run. And some of the challenges you have there is when the industry, it's not their money, they are not always incentivized to make those green designs or to make the program as most cost efficient and maximize recovery, because they ultimately, it's not their money. There's not their skin's not in the game. So with those two programs, there have been multiple cleanup bills which add performance requirements or add certain elements to improve the program. But it's through those learned experiences that we know that any future program in California will not include a consumer fee without the proper safeguards to protect the money and protect the program. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. I know we shared a lot of information today, but ultimately following CPSC on social media and joining our listservs. This is the first place we send our information out. And you can get regular updates on phase 2 and our next webinar in composting. You can also join us and LA Sand for phase 2. If anyone in this room or in this webinar is interested in recovery or upcycling, you can not only join for phase 2, but we can also add you to the map. Again, it's free for you to participate, not free for us because we pay you, but ultimately we want to see more businesses get involved and more businesses joining the map so that we can promote and celebrate those who are already doing the work. And ultimately supporting active legislation. It's through advocates like CPSC that we do a lot of the lobbying and we do a lot of the work to actually get these laws passed. There's an opportunity at the local level to support LA San if they should introduce anything at the local level. There's also opportunities at the state level. I mentioned I mentioned just the recycling one. The other one is a PFAS ban in all of textiles. And the third one was a microfiber bill and looking at how we can add filtration devices. But by supporting this active legislation, calling your legislator and saying, textiles are a concern, we need to act, it sets up the flags. It sets off alerts so that our policymakers know, they already know recycling is an issue. They already know recycling needs help and policy support. But to call out specifically textiles and to call out some of the active and proposed bills shows our policymakers that we can't do this on voluntary action alone. So I want to actually take a moment and just see if anyone has questions. We could do these a couple different ways. I can scroll through the chat. I can read out the questions. We can also take ourselves off mute. It's a nice little group here, so we can always just kind of discuss as a group. So I see that Mike O'Donnell from the Mattress Recycling Council, who runs the Mattress Stewardship Program, they do have an RFP, which is a request for proposals for research on textile recycling. Some of the materials that are specifically in the mattresses aren't the exact same as the garments. So they do have a funding call for anyone who is interested. And there's opportunities. Let's see, Mike, you want to share?
Sure. Yeah, just this is something that MRC has been funding for a number of years now. We most recently put out a very specific RFP because we found that the 23% of material that we cannot recycle in our program is primarily mixed textiles. And Joanne, as you pretty clearly stated earlier, textiles that have a combination of, say, cotton and polyester, rayon, other synthetics, whatever it might be, is just, they're very challenging. We do have one program or one study ongoing where we're doing some biological enzymatic digestion to see if that's a viable approach for us, but it's just a long way off. And we have seen some other similar types of studies in the EU. So anyway, encourage you, please follow that link. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly. And somebody's got their hand up.
Carrie, do you want to go next?
Sure, I put my hand up. I'm actually at Woodbury University right now dyeing some jackets behind me. But I wanted to ask more about like your relationship with CSUN and like how maybe I could help get Woodbury University involved, because we have a fashion department up here, and I teach the circular fashion program, and we're always looking for, of course, dead stock donations, of course, but like to go beyond that. You know, I'd be interested in learning more of what CSUN's doing and how, you know, to get more universities like Woodbury involved. Oh, you're muted.
Absolutely. And we enjoyed working with the universities because prior to our partnership, they were paying for a lot of these materials. So the easiest way is for us to add you to the map as a receiver, as a collector. The other thing is setting up those relationships that were kind of ongoing. So what I've noticed is, for example, one of our dead stock providers had kept in contact with CSUN as Cpsc backed out. Ultimately, our goal at Cpsc is to back out. We're not program operators. We're researchers and advocates and educators. So building those long-term relationships was really key for us. So A, I could add you to the map, and B, I could put you in direct contact with some of our large dead stock generators who it's not as frequent, but I know that relationship, they're always happy to donate it to students over tossing it.
Sure. And I know Woodbury too, like just this spring launched a compost program on campus. So yeah, that recipe you were talking about of adding natural fibers to it, that would be, I'd love to receive that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have your email. I'll reach out to you afterwards, and we can get Woodbury all engaged. Thank you. Let's do Shauna next, and then I see a chatted question from Jessica. We'll take that after Shauna.
Awesome. Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, so I work for Recology, which is a hauler recycler. So I'm always thinking, or at least these days, thinking a lot in terms of the infrastructure. And you mentioned that the textiles can't go to kind of a classic MRF. And I understand that. It certainly does cause problems for the machinery and all that. I'm wondering, though, if rather than building, whole separate facilities, if it would make sense to think in terms of more like a zero waste park, so there's some sort of like somewhat separate stream, for the textiles, but it's still maybe like some sort of annex, or I don't know what to call it, but an adjunct building on the same site or something, because the rest of the infrastructure would be there, and the trucks coming and going. I don't know, it just seems like there might be some economies that could be gained that way rather than just writing off the MRFs altogether.
Absolutely. And I can't say any names, but I can say there are some haulers and MRF operators in the LA region who are interested in maybe having a textile line in a separate building. Currently, that doesn't exist, but I will say the opportunity to kind of do those centralized collection, there are opportunities, because what we found in Los Angeles, where there were 2 zones in particular that had 30% of their waste stream was textiles. Wow. So even just finding locations within those zones could make it more convenient than it already is. Mm-hmm. But the other model that we're tossing around is maybe a large-scale sorting facility could be a thrift, or could be an established garment collector who adds recycling bins and adds those bins for the unusables. Mm-hmm. But again, as long as the financial incentives aren't there, They make more money mixing it into the bales and dumping it on other countries. So that's why we need EPR, and we need the economics to flip so that it's more incentivized to collect and sort.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Carrie, let's go back to you before we go to Jessica's question.
No, I can't. I'll go after the rest of the questions. I don't want to take the time.
All right, so Jessica, who is a Recycla waste hauler, says, did they all keep saying the hauler has to haul in order to do so legally under Recycla agreement? A company can actually haul the textiles without being a Recycla hauler if they do not charge for the haul. Absolutely. The collection doesn't solely have to be with the waste hauler. Also, the waste hauler can also do a third-party LABAVN contract with a partnership. So absolutely, those are some of the details. We kind of kept it high level because within Recycla, yes, an authorized hauler who wants to haul textiles has to drop at an authorized facility. But there's a lot of small-scale haulers, small-scale collectors who are circumventing and not participating in Recycla because they're not actually hauling waste. So if the haul and the materials are not charged for, then it's actually just a donation of commodity materials. And so that's one way that actually we designed this program, because we didn't have the funds to engage a full dump truck worth of textiles. We paid our generators $1 a pound for their textiles, and we paid for mailing and shipping. But that's right, because it doesn't have to be a Recycla hauler. But if a Recycla hauler wanted to haul textiles, it would have to incorporate an authorized facility. And the opportunity for a third-party partnership, again, is another great opportunity. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of collectors in this space who want to partner with cities and counties, who want to participate with the generators. But in that contract and in that relationship, as long as there's transparency and performance requirements, that's the one thing I would really suggest that we, in any future partnerships. And then Jessica added, has the city considered directing their 600 to 700 annual community funds to support textile reuse and recycling in the city? These are not hauler allocated funds. Mark, are you able to speak on that?
So I'm not able to speak on this. We'll definitely look into it and get back to you, Jessica, but also to thank you for bringing up the point about the the hauler, like how Recycla haulers can haul for free, or can haul if they wanted to, and other haulers can haul as well. And we're more referring to when the material enters into the black bin, companies cannot haul or touch it, because that is when it becomes Recycla property. In order to do what you also brought up, Jessica, is we would have to have separate collection bins that the material would not have to go into any type of Recycla authorized bin or anything like that. And that is the only way to have third companies and things haul it. But thank you for bringing that point up. And feel free, if you want to add anything, Jessica, you can also just turn on your mic and say what you need to say.
Yeah, just a quick one. The city's sitting on a really fat fund, lot of money annually, a lot of money that is under the Recycla contract that the haulers can't allocate. And we don't know where that money's going. And they also have a material reuse and food recovery funding. It's not just for food recovery. The material reuse and food recovery funding is specifically allocated by the waste haulers, and most of it is actually going to food recovery, not material reuse. I may be one of few of the waste haulers that actually have some of our material fund, or some of our funding going towards material reuse. Our only funder right now for that is LA Shares, or nonprofit organization. But there's also the community fund, and I'm just putting that out there because I really think that the city needs to be transparent on where that community fund is going, how much there is sitting in that fund. And it really, if we're trying to push these diversion programs for something that has, 3 to 8% of the pie of our diversion, the hauler is just a go-between, You know, if we do events and we set up an open top and we collect all this material and go take it over to, God, I hope someplace that's able to really process it at the amount that we're going to be able to give them, because we know places like Sway are not going to be able to take the amount that we're going to provide them. So if we are looking at this as such an important piece of the textile of the diversion pie, then we also need to be taking those monies that are coming out of the RFP and reinvesting them back into growing those diversion opportunities. And so we have that annual community fund. So this is a piece of the pie that doesn't get as much attention, but really needs it. And so those on the call too, you talk to your council members. That fund, that money exists, but we don't know where it's going. So I know the city knows, right? And the city's doing great work. But let's, maybe there's an opportunity here to really encourage the city to direct the upcoming funds towards textile recycling and reuse opportunities.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Jessica. I personally am not aware of the exact allocation of where this money is going, but I can definitely check on it and find out and get back to you. And yeah, we'll definitely revisit that once I get more clarification.
Thank you for bringing that up, Jessica. It's always interesting to hear, all the different funding opportunities. Carrie, let's go to your second question before I go to the next two in the chat.
Sure. So you're sorry, there's a commotion out there. Like you're saying 3 big sorting facilities in Los Angeles is like a goal. But what would be like the definitions or requirements for this big sorting facility? Because I like my business and the handful of smaller businesses that I'm very connected with, who we're all kind of collecting and sorting and processing, but we're smaller. Like, are there, what might be ways that like smaller ones can, I don't know, somehow come together or something to like be, to create this larger space that you're envisioning? Like, what is the larger space? And then, maybe smaller businesses can band together to help create that somehow.
Absolutely. So when I said 3 to handle that management, we're using the metric that Tomra shared. So Tomra is a large sorting machine manufacturer who has 2 textile sorting lines in Europe, one in Sweden and one in Belgium. So they are interested in building one in Los Angeles, but their capacity is 30,000 tons a year if they're running 24/7. So that's where I said we need at least 3 if they're running at that capacity. But I will say there's always room for smaller businesses. I don't even think those 3 large would really be able to take in residential or if we start expanding the scope outside of the city to other cities. So when I say 3, we're thinking these are large scale automated infrared spectrometer lines, and they usually have 3 lines, and their capacity is 30,000 tons a year. So that being said, for some of the smaller businesses, that key piece of information is as long as the generator's not paying you to take the materials and not paying you for the materials, otherwise that makes you a waste hauler and you need to become certified. But I've seen other ways, whether it's membership opportunities or donation opportunities, and you can make your money through the actual processing. But there are opportunities for smaller and medium-sized collectors to participate with the businesses and future operators within Recycla. And we're happy to set up calls with the Recycla team if you're interested in understanding kind of what are the steps to becoming part of that program. But that's a really good segue into David's question. So David says, do you anticipate the reclaimers to do the sorting, or will there be a textile recovery facility that reclaimers can buy? So we do think that a third-party sorting is going to be the best. Each reclaimer or recycler has very specific materials they can take. And a lot of them are not willing to take in materials that don't meet their specifications. In every other program, whether it's the carpet program, the mattress program, there are other places that are collecting them, transporting them to the sorters, and those sorters work directly with the reclaimers and recyclers. So we do think that's a better model. A lot of times if we're asking reclaimers or the generators to do the sorting, they're challenged by space and transportation costs. So again, having a program that funds the space and the storage and transportation, subsidizes the sorting and recycling is the most economically equitable approach. And then the next question is from Crystal. Has there been more research and interest locally in creating building materials from textiles? There is, and actually one of the largest recyclers in the carpet program makes decking boards. And they also is another company that makes like wheelchair ramps out of some of the carpet materials. And so I will say there are some companies out of Arizona that takes blue jeans and makes countertops. We've also seen shredding into insulation, but putting that disclaimer out there, a lot of times when you start mixing in other polymers and mixing in adhesives, your secondary product is not recyclable. So it is oftentimes considered a down cycle. If you're creating a product which in itself is not recyclable, it also raises concerns on any of the chemicals you need to add in to make sure they don't leach out. I know one of the interests has been to put tire crumb and recycled plastics into like road paving, but we know from microplastics and we know from that the roads deconstruct or fall apart. So we really want to avoid any unintended consequences where these fibers could enter our environment because we don't have the ability to remove them. I also see that Libby, I'm sorry if I missed you, but your hand is up. If you want to unmute, I'm happy to take your question.
Thank you so much. This has been a really interesting presentation. I really appreciate all the data that you're sharing. I've worked in the apparel industry for a while, and throughout all kinds of fibers and fabrics, the chemical applications are applied at various stages of production, and that's true for natural as well as synthetic fibers. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about the implications of that, particularly in composting, based on your research so far. And in particular, I'm really curious about leather, and if that was part of the pilot, and any comments you have about an end of life for leather.
Thank you. Yeah, so composting any material is the biggest risk that anyone can take because we put so much money into our compost infrastructure that one batch of synthetics could really ruin it. So we definitely had to take those extra steps of due diligence to make sure that the materials we were sourcing were completely traced and free of those chemicals. And the apparel industry is not required to disclose those chemical finishes. So at this point, we do not recommend composting for any materials that don't have an MSDS sheet that has all the ingredients that are all food grade or higher or better. So, and speaking to leather, I mean, I know the tanning chemicals are some of the harshest in most compared to other textiles. So we did not take on textile leather. I know that traditional leather is one of the most durable fabrics on there. So I think any of the materials that we took in that were leather or comparable were definitely upcycled or kind of repaired because given their durability. But I also know that there's increasing popularity for things like mushroom leathers and pineapple leathers and other type of cellulosic type leathers, SCOBY, kind of kombucha leathers. And our biggest disclaimer is unless the transparency is there on types of chemicals used, we do not recommend putting any of those materials into compost or recycling. So a lot of the new materials we see entering the market are ultimately landfill bound, unless there's a take back program or full transparency. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess I would add that it's not just the apparel industry is not sharing this, it's that the chemical suppliers don't share their recipes. And so transparency for those that are further downstream in these supply chains is not there. And they typically don't share it for business confidentiality reasons, for competitive reasons. It's really hard to know what is in chemical products that are applied to all kinds of textiles.
Absolutely. And you actually made another good point that we talked a lot about the garment and fashion industry, but we see textiles in automotives, we see it in agencies and other hospitals. So there's not really just garments, but I really appreciate you bringing that point up, that it's other industries and also the suppliers that are often keeping back that transparency. So there's still an opportunity. We're at time. We are going to post this recording online. We also are available if anyone has any follow-up questions, comments, or would like any detailed information that we presented today. We really appreciate everyone's time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Earth Week, and anything you can do to help us with our mission to get an ongoing program, please let us know. We'd love to get more coalition building. So thank you again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.